Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear Review, and today we're looking at the Glycine Airman, the GL0156. It's a watch that, as far as the classic nature of the Glycine Airman, the history behind it, going all the way back to the early 50s, is unchallenged. I mean, it's just one of those watches that you hear a lot about when it comes down to a GMT, to a pilot-style watch, to a rotating bezel that's locked down by a clamp. It's just a classic story behind a watch. And for me, it was great to hear about. I've watched all kinds of videos on it, but I was never one to really get sucked into just the design of the watch. I thought, oh, it's nice. It has a 24-hour dial. It has a 24-hour bezel. It has the GMT hand. If you want the GMT hand, they have them like that. Lo and behold, I find a watch that's low-priced. They're willing to sell it for the price, and it was like brand new. And I was like, I'm in. And once I got the watch in hand and put it on the wrist, I was taken in. Now, it's not a perfect watch. There's a few things in here that I don't like, but it's a really, really good watch. So let's get into the review. The 5 things we typically talk about, which are size, fitment, finish, accuracy, legibility, and lume, with some conclusions at the end, uses, that kind of thing. So let's start off with size. This watch takes up a lot of real estate. It has a 44 millimeter case, 12 millimeters off the wrist, 22 millimeters width for the lug. The lug-to-lug length is long. This watch is longer. I don't have I'll put the numbers down here for you on this one, but I've noticed on my wrist, this is one of the longer watches that I wear on the wrist. So not only does it take up a lot of real estate width-wise, but length-wise across the wrist, it's also a longer watch. So for those of you with smaller wrists, this is going to be a tough watch to pull off. For those of you with, below average size wrist, it's going to be close. Average on up, I think this is going to be a great fit for most people. Now, as far as the way this watch goes, it's a heavy watch, stainless steel case, stainless steel bracelet. It's a butterfly clasp bracelet, so you've got some extra stuff going on there. But at the same time, the weight, I think, kind of lends itself to what this watch, the history, just the legacy of this watch overall. So I'm okay with it. It's kind of that dive watch weight to it. It does have 100 meters of water resistance too, so this is not a lightweight by any means. As far as fitment goes, this is probably the biggest issue that I have with this watch. And one of the issues from me not buying this watch from the get-go was the butterfly clasp. I am not a fan of butterfly clasps because traditionally they're just hard to get fit on the wrist. You don't have the micro adjust that you do on a dive style clasp, scissor style clasp. So to me, this is something that just was kind of a negative. I'm fortunate though, because this watch actually does fit. It's a little bit snug, which is okay because this is a heavier watch too. So the heavier the watch, the snugger the fit is my rationale behind that. So the lighter the watch doesn't have to be as close to the wrist, doesn't have to be as tight. So this is a heavy watch, so I'm putting this close to the wrist anyway. Is it too tight? No. It's actually just snug enough. And so when I sit down on the couch and relax, it feels good. When I'm out doing stuff, working out in the gym or going outside and doing work on my business, on the equipment, things like that, it's a little bit snug, but it's not uncomfortable at all. So to me, it's the perfect fit, all things considered. Okay, ideally, I wish it had a on-the-fly adjustable clasp. That would be the best, maybe I'll get to that point. But I just love the bracelet. It's an H-link bracelet. It has high polished the H part of the H-link. The center links are all vertically brushed. So you get this contrast between polished and brushed. It gives itself more of a kind of refined look overall too. So this is less of a tool watch and probably more of a professional, semi-formal type watch because of all the polish that's on this watch. So let's get into the finish of this watch. The case itself is mostly polished, and I really like that because it lends itself again to more opportunities to wear this for maybe dressier occasions. It has a tool watch look to it for sure. There's no doubt about it. But there's a lot of polish on the mid case, on the side of the case. The lugs on top are vertically brushed, so you get that contrast between brushing and high polish. You have a stainless steel bezel, which also has that kind of brushed look to it as well. So you get a lot of contrasting I don't know, reflections of light being dispersed by the brushing and light being reflected back because of the high polish case, those kind of things. And again, the bracelet has that alternating H-link, center link, polish, brush, which I really like. I think it breaks up the monotony of a bracelet. Sometimes the all brushed bracelets are a little bit boring when it comes down to the light play that they have or don't have coming off of the bracelet. So to me, I like it. I think it's great. The overall finish of the case and the bracelet is great. Butterfly clasp. Takes a little getting used to, but I'm just not a fan of them, but I'm tolerating it. I think it's okay. I'm just wondering when this thing is going to pop open. And that's just a worry of mine. One of the things I like about the diver style, scissor style clasp with the safety clasp over the top is the safety clasp. It's a dual mechanism that prevents that clasp from accidentally opening up. So, and that's probably more because I've used a lot of these watches for work. This watch is going to be more for the non-work environment, so casual, office work, semi-professional, professional, that kind of thing. Is it a formal style watch? Probably not. I'm kind of getting into the uses right now. I don't think this is going to qualify really for a formal style watch. It's a bit big for it. Maybe a little bit too much brushing on there, a little tooly, maybe too much of a tooly looking watch. But the semi-formal, professional, office, that whole thing is just going to be outstanding for that. All right, let's go to the dial. The dial itself is fantastic. And I think this is part of what really lured me into buying this watch. The top hemisphere of this dial is black. It's kind of a I don't know, faded black. There's no real clear delineation between the blue and the black. You can definitely see it's there, but there's no real clear delineation between the two. And the bottom half of the dial, the hemisphere, is blue, and it just really sets the tone for that AM PM side, or that daylight nighttime look of a 24-hour watch. And the history of this watch is fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the history of this watch. The history of Glycine starts in the early 20th century with Eugene Milan, its founder. In 1914, he established the company La Glycine. By 1916, he sold his company to a company that was set out to make pocket watches and women's watches that were more serviceable. Now, there was already an automatic movement invented by John Harwood. He had a patent both in the UK and also in Switzerland. This patent was expected to expire in the early 1930s. Eugene knew this, and he began working on his own automatic self-winding mechanical movement. By 1929, an economic depression took hold of the entire globe. The labor market had crashed, and Swiss watch companies that were not solid economically began closing their doors. In the 1930s, John Harwood's automatic movement patent was to expire. Eugene collaborated with his old company Glycine to manufacture and patent his new automatic EMSA movement. This partnership between Glycine and Eugene saved this company and provided automatic movements for the watch industry. Also in the 1930s, Glycine was responsible for a patent for a window display for the date. By 1942, Glycine's movement was acquired by ASUAG. ASUAG eventually merged with Swiss Watch Group in the 1980s. Some notable patents by Glycine include the 1942 bidirectional rotor. In 1959, Glycine patented and produced the first vacuum-sealed watch that was thought to prevent the drying of lubrications within the watch movement. In 1953, the patented Airman debuted. This watch was widely used by United States Air Force personnel in Vietnam, and because of that was made available at PXs, or purchase exchange, on U.S. bases. In 1965, the most notable use of the Glycine Airman was by Pete Conrad, an American astronaut, who wore this watch on Gemini 5 and Gemini 11. It became the first official automatic watch to be worn and exposed to outer space on a spacewalk. So the history kind of lends itself to the dial and the bezel. And with that in mind, you really get to see how Glycine and the company from the 1950s all the way to today have really maintained the aeronautical necessities that they went to address, that they tried to address with this watch, and I think they did so successfully. So great on Glycine for coming up with this watch for the 24-hour dial, the 24-hour bezel, the lockdown bezel, the GMT hand, putting this all together for just some great timekeeping when it comes to different time zones. So as far as a travel watch goes, this might be one of the best analog travel watches that you can get that also has the history to support it. The design features are straightforward and good. I really like it a lot. So this watch just hits all the boxes when it comes down to the design features. Now the finishing, I love the finishing of the watch. You have the handset, which is great. It has the syringe tips on the end with high polish surround on the loom. You have the second hand has a little loom pip on there, which is great. The GMT hand is distinctly different from the other hands, the hour hand and the minute hand, which I think is very important. Sometimes these GMT watches, they're not quite different enough, especially when the lights go out and the loom kicks in. That's where I think you really have to have that distinguishing design between the GMT hand and the hour hand and minute hand. This watch, I think, covers the bases that way because it has just that very end of the GMT hand loomed up, whereas the hour hand and minute hand have extensive loom almost all the way up and down the hands themselves. So those three hands are very distinguishable from each other, which is great. I like the hour markers. You have the 12 hour, the 12 o'clock, the 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock are distinguished from the other hour markers on here. Of course, it's a 24-hour dial. That takes a little getting used to when it comes down to reading the dial. I really like that. I think the overall design of the dial is fantastic. Again, that gradient between blue and black is awesome. Gives a little bit of something subtle. The date window is perfect because really, it needs to have that white background to really match up with the 12, 6, and 9, which I think it does very well. It doesn't stand out obnoxiously different from those other three markers. To me, this dial is laid out really well. The finishing is done really well. It's just a really attractive watch. Now, we've kind of gone over the uses. What are some of the things I don't like about this watch? Really, it comes down to the clasp. I'm not a fan of the clasp because the micro adjust piece just forces me to either be a little bit uncomfortable when I wear this watch under certain circumstances. I think in this day and age, the on-the-fly adjustable clasp is really a necessity for most watches. And this is more of a dressy watch. I think that's where they're going with the butterfly clasp on this watch. So it kind of fits. It matches up. I'm okay with it. But as far as the tool side of it, it doesn't match. So if we're going to have this be an airman style watch, I think you really need to stick with some kind of a tooly, more adjustable, user-friendly type clasp on here. This kind of clasp lends itself to being more of a dress watch, kind of that Rolex luxury dress watch type thing, which it's really not. Price-wise, design-wise, it's just not in that category. And the last ding on this watch is really the lug-to-lug length. So across the wrist, it's a little bit long. If it's possible to make this just a little bit smaller, that's fine. I think it's not a huge ding on this watch. The whole idea of a pilot watch is a large dial. And with a large dial, you're going to cover up a lot of real estate on the wrist. So I get that. Not a huge deal, but it is a ding. It's just a little bit long when it comes down to the overall dimensions. I think it could be just a little bit shorter, which might force the lugs to be a little bit closer together. Instead of a 22 millimeter between the lug distance, it might be a 20. Lord forbid it be a 21. Nobody wants a 21. So I'll take the 22. It's just not my favorite. So overall score for this watch, 9.7 out of 10. Highly recommend this watch. I think this is one of those classic watches, kind of like a Hamilton. You got to have a Seiko. You got to have a classic legendary Casio, whether it be the Square or, Lord forbid, the F91. I can't stand it. But it is a legendary watch out there. Even the calculator watch, the CA53. There's a bunch of classics out there. I think this is in that same category of an affordable classic. You really should have a Glycine Airman. If you're looking for a 24-hour GMT style watch, this really is the one to go after. It has a great movement. I didn't mention this before, but the movement in here is the GL293, I think, which is a high beat 28K movement. So you're getting a high quality, high beat movement in a GMT format. And the overall price for this watch, I think it all fits really well. I think it's one of the better values for a GMT watch that has a larger brand name that also has a massive history behind it. So this watch has been in space as far as design goes. It's been with the U.S. Air Force. It's been in the commercial airline business. This is a highly respected, highly sought after watch, frankly, and I think it's very much worth the money. So there you go, 9.7 out of 10. Put your comments down below. Love to hear what you have to say on this. Also check out my website for any reviewed watches that I have up for sale. I'm adding a few very shortly. I've been saying that the last couple of videos. I have just been inundated with just small projects that keep coming up, but they are coming in there. I've got an Islander I think I'm going to put up there. I've got a helm that I'm putting on there. I think I've got another Casio or two that I'm going to be adding to the website. So keep checking it out, realidealgear.com. Go to the shop page and check it out and see what you think. So there you go. My name is Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear Review. We'll catch you guys next time. Ideal Gear Review. And today we're looking at the Glycine GL. Let's start this over again. All right. This data takes up on my wrist. Freaking humorous. The crap falling off all over the place. All right, here we go.